Hello YouTubers, Alaska Prepper here. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to be putting out a few videos today which are the meat and potatoes of the live stream that we had this morning. The reason I'm breaking it down into a few videos is because we covered a lot of stuff there, and I figured it'd be a lot easier for you to digest and a lot easier for you to pick and choose what you want to watch depending on the subject matter for that video. Again, we had a lot to talk about today, and every one of those subject matters that we talked about today I feel is pretty important, so I'm taking the time to go ahead and put it out in a few different videos. All right, so here it says the U.S. needs a new strategy to stop Saudi Arabia and the Big I support for the Big R. So pretty much they're saying that, hey, Saudi Arabia is supporting the Big R and the Big I. We need a new strategy to stop them. But guess what, ladies and gentlemen? There's nothing to be said. There is no strategy that we can use in order to stop them unless we want to go over there and do the same thing to them that we did to Iraq and that we did in Afghanistan. It is over. People right now in the United States that are not preparing, that are not getting stocked up as much as they can, they will suffer, ladies and gentlemen, because our world hegemony, meaning that the countries that have any respect for us at all, they're gone. All they're doing is making believe that they have respect for this country still until the time comes that they can abandon us. They're all lining up with the BRICS nations and asking them to join in with their banking system that is separate from the banking system that we use in the Western nations, i.e. SWIFT. They're all joining up with them, getting in line, putting in their applications so that the day that the U.S. Federal Reserve note is no longer the world reserve currency, that they can transition to that other system that is being hosted by the East, right, by the BRICS nations. We have a whole bunch of nations that are wanting to join the BRICS nations because they see what's coming down the line. They see that the dollar is going to die eventually, and it's going to be sooner than later. Am I saying that this is going to happen tomorrow? And I'm telling you to go take all your money out of the bank and put it into gold and silver? No, absolutely not. You continue to do what you're doing. You continue to prepare. If you have the budget to prepare better and faster, then that's what I would do. But if you don't, then you continue to prepare, slow and steady. This is a slow-moving train. We're getting a little bit faster. And I think that eventually we're going to get so fast that it's going to go straight up. It's going to do the hockey stick that we saw happen back in during Germany, during their hyperinflation. It's going to do the hockey stick that we've seen from Venezuela, from Zimbabwe, from Argentina, from all of these countries that have had hyperinflation. People think that the inflation that we have now is terrible, that it's too much, that it's really affecting their standard of living. You just wait until we have absolutely no control whatsoever over what these countries, who are in reality our adversaries. And when I say our adversaries, I don't mean the people. I mean governments to governments. Remember, ladies and gentlemen, that when politicians fail, it is you, the people, that pay the price. They never do. So all of these sanctions, all of these restrictions, all of these policies, they're not onto the people. They're onto governments and their pundits, but it affects us. So this is just another nail in the coffin of the Federal Reserve note. And it seems to me that we've pretty much lost. If we lose Saudi Arabia, which in my opinion, we've lost Saudi Arabia. That is it. It is over. Let me go ahead and give you a little bit of a background for those of you that may not know this. I'm assuming that most of you do know this, but for those of you that don't, I'll give you a little bit of background. Back in 1971, Richard Nixon took us off the gold standard, off the Bretton Woods standard, which was a standard where the dollar was backed up by 40% in gold. Okay, he took us off. Why? Because the government had printed so much money to cover the Vietnam War that other nations, other countries were like, hey, wait a minute, how in the world do you have all of this money when your gold reserves have not gone up, right? Because the dollar was backed by gold. So they're like, how is it that you have all of this money to go to war for all of these years when you haven't increased your gold reserves? How is it? So they started asking for their gold back. We were sitting at 20-something thousand tons of gold. By the time that we got down to about 8,000 tons of gold, Nixon said, no more. We're getting off the gold standard. You're just going to have to trust us that your dollars that you have are going to be able to get used for something. right? A lot of people talk about the oil embargo back in the 70s. Ladies and gentlemen, that wasn't because there was a supply of oil shortage, a shortage of supply of oil. That's because our dollar was not being accepted. During that time, we had tankers full of oil sitting outside of the Gulf, full of oil ready to deliver. But they wanted something better than the dollar. And the dollar is all we had. And we would not give up the little bit of gold that we had left. Let's take it to 1973. Kissinger, I believe he was the Secretary of State during that time for Nixon still. He goes to Saudi Arabia and he says, hey, Saudi Arabia, I have a great deal for you. You don't really have a big army. So what we're going to do is the United States is going to go ahead and fight for you if we need to fight for you. So you don't need to get an army, because whatever military or wars or whatever it is that you need for us to take care of, we're going to take care of it for you. So we're going to be your personal army, and we're going to sell you arms. However many arms you want, we're going to sell it to you. So you're going to have a country that can sell you all the arms you want, and that will go to fight for you. And Saudi Arabia said, well, what do you want in return? And Kissinger said, the only thing that we want is that you get together with the other OPEC nations, the ones that produce the oil and sell it nationally. You get together with them and you tell them that they can only sell oil in dollars. And therefore, the petrodollar was born. That people think that the dollar is backed by oil, but it's not. It's backed by the need that countries have for dollars in order to buy oil in the international market. Right? So that's the deal that we made with them back, I believe it was 1973. And ever since then, countries had to buy dollars, because if they wanted oil, they had to have dollars in reserves. So we were able to print dollars out of thin air and buy all of these things from other countries. We would print dollars out of thin air, and then some country, let's say India, they would sell us flip-flops for paper dollars. Why? Because they needed the dollars in order to buy oil. Well, that's coming to an end. Saudi Arabia is lost. We've lost Saudi Arabia. You know, there's no headline saying that we lost Saudi Arabia, but ladies and gentlemen, we have. Arms Control Association. The president has been urged to halt arms sales to Saudi Arabia. But why? We've been dealing with Saudi Arabia for 50 years now. Why all of a sudden are we not going to sell them any more arms? Wasn't the military industrial complex making a lot of money doing that? Don't they want to still make a lot of money doing that? Well, following a decision by Saudi Arabia to reduce oil production, members of the U.S. Congress are pressuring the president to halt or alter arm transfers and other military support to the kingdom, arguing that their policies now align with Russia, arguing that Saudi Arabia's policies now align with Russia. Right, ladies and gentlemen, like I said, we've lost Saudi Arabia. And they're the only ones keeping, in my opinion, keeping the Federal Reserve note important in the world. As soon as OPEC starts accepting anything other than the dollar for oil sales, that is it. The dollar is done. And let me tell you what's even scarier than that, is that there are quadrillions of dollars around the earth that are not here in the United States. I'm not talking about trillions. I'm talking about quadrillions. There's quadrillions of derivatives of the dollar out there, right, that need dollars, physical dollars, in order to be paid for. And when that happens, ladies and gentlemen, when we are no longer recognized as having the reserve currency of the world, the dollar will go to zero. And that is why they are working on the CBDC so much, because they know they're going to need another system besides the Federal Reserve note, because we will no longer have world hegemony with the Federal Reserve note. That's why they're working on it so hard, because they do know what is coming down the line. They know. But if you don't know, ladies and gentlemen, most people would say, well, how can I change that? How can we change it? You can't. You can't change it. But you can protect yourself and your family. You can stock up on the things that you need that you know are going to be 10 times what you're paying for them now in a year or two. You can do that now. You can stock up on heating oil if you use heating oil before it's not available, because we have some kind of a crisis where our dollar is no good. And who here works for free? The potato farmer doesn't farm potatoes because he loves to give away potatoes. He or she farms potatoes because they know they're going to make a profit so that they can support their families. Nobody works for free, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, and here is the nail in the coffin of the Federal Reserve note. Russia offers arms sales as Saudi Arabia rages against the president. So here, as our Congress is telling the president, hey, you have to stop selling arms to Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is like, who cares? I'll get my arms from Russia. Who cares? I'll get them from Russia. That is it. You know, I can't sit here and tell you that things are going to turn around in one day or a week. But I can tell you this, because history says so, is that eventually the Federal Reserve note will no longer be what it is today. Actually, it's not what it was last year, because it buys you a lot less than it did last year. But what I'm saying is that the more of those Federal Reserve notes that you have, that you've accumulated, that you've spent your life earning and putting away so that one day you can use them and retire with a little bit of dignity. When that time comes, a lot of people are going to find out that they have nothing left. All right, ladies and gentlemen, because it's going to be gone. I remember reading an article a long time ago, and for as hard as I've tried, I cannot find this article anywhere. But it was an article about a young man that went into his father's house. And this was somewhere in Eastern Europe. A young man went into his father's house. Well, him and his wife went into his father's and his mother's house. And they were telling his father, man, we're in big trouble. If we don't pay this off tomorrow, we're going to lose our house. So he needed a certain amount of money in order to pay off what he owed, or they were going to lose their house, you know, the son and his daughter. So the father goes under his bed and he brings out a big bag of currency. And he tells his son, here, take whatever you want. Take as much as you want. Whatever you need, take it. I've been saving this my whole life. Well, what the father had not realized is that the government or the country that they were in, and I forget the country, but it was like a Eastern European country. You know, I don't know. I don't think it was Russia, maybe Czechoslovakia or something like that. But anyways, the son looks at the currency and he says, Dad, he says, this currency is not good anymore. They changed our financial system. So in front of his father was sitting a pile of money that he thought was money that he had worked for all his life and saved all his life, to find out that when they needed it the most, it wasn't there for them because it was worth nothing. And eventually, ladies and gentlemen, that's what's going to happen with this system. As I've stated, they're going to need a very big crisis. They'll need a very, very big crisis in order to get people to accept the CBDC. And that is their next step, is to put out a CBDC. People are going to be in such despair that they will accept it. They will accept it. But it'll take a couple of years before they realize that that was the biggest mistake that we as a nation could have done, is to go into a system that was going to completely enslave us as a people and have only a few at the top calling the shots for everything that you do on an everyday basis.